Okay, yes, so welcome very much to this special interest group on PostNormal takes on science, technology, and policy for sustainability. And we have these meetings every last Thursday in the month. So today is February, and we have Lorenzo Benini from the European Environmental Agency here in Copenhagen, and your title is Practicing Postnormal Science at the European Environment Agency Challenges and Opportunities. So, and you, Lorenzo, are also one of the organizers of this special interest group. So we look very much forward to your presentation. And I suppose you will speak for maybe no more than 45 minutes, and then we will have discussions. Yeah. Should we, by the way, should we take a round of introductions now that we are so few? Maybe that would be nice. I think we should actually. And I will start. So I'm Tom Børsen, and I'm from Aalborg University. Yes, let's move on. Katinka.
Yep, I'm Katinka Johansen. I'm from, I'm at Lund University at the moment. No, Tom from Aalborg.
Okay, Silvio.
Yes, I'm Silvia Funtovic, and I suppose I don't have to tell you anymore.
Nicola.
Good afternoon. I'm Nicola. I've been working for the JRC for 8 years on complex systems and social practice theories. So I'm very interested in postnormal science.
Thank you. Jan?
Hi, I'm Jan Mehlich. I'm from Bonn University. I'm doing LZ research there.
Simon?
Hi, I'm Simon Maisch. I work at the Ethics Center in Tübingen, but I'm currently at the SVT in Bergen doing research on postnormal science.
Okay, Övunç.
Hi everyone, I'm in European Environment Agency as well. My main focus is on sustainability measurements. Thanks.
Helena?
Yeah, hi, I'm Helena. I'm a research assistant at Aalborg University and educated as a techno-anthropologist.
Thank you. So with this round of introduction, Lorenzo, over to you, and you can introduce yourself more if you find the need for that. So all right, we look forward.
Thank you very much, Tom, and welcome to everyone also from my side. I will share my screen. Let me just, can you just confirm you can see the presentation? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I work at the European Environment Agency. It's been nearly 6 years, and before I was at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. And the presentation I'm going to give is really coming from the perspective of, let's say, practitioner in a sense, or a hands-on a person that has been trying to reflect on how some insights that postnormal science provides, at least my take, can be operationalized or not in the context within which I'm working, because I think there are indeed some opportunities there. So I'm going to present a couple of cases and a bit of background about the institution, and so you can grasp what we're doing, and because that has an influence, of course, on the degree of certain changes and practices that can be implemented. But my background, just to say, I'm an environmental scientist by background, and have been moving fundamentally from more a world that was a kind of knowledge environment, which was mostly about quantification of physical interactions, towards the very challenging and important world of the social sciences, at least from the perspective of my interest. So this also, I guess, reflects a bit the attempts that have been made here with good cooperation, I think, and help from the community in PostNormal Science. Right. So the European Environment Agency is a body of the European Union that has a clear mandate. Now it's the one of basically being a provisioner of timely, targeted, relevant and reliable information to policymakers and the general public in view of supporting sustainable development and kind of measuring and assessing the progress that Europe is making toward in the environment. It's a EU body, but it is not composed by European Union countries only. The EA membership is wider. Now we count 34 countries, and some are cooperating. Some others are part of this large network of cooperating bodies, and that has a lot to do with the fact that as we collect mostly a lot of data and information that is allowed and enabled by a structure that builds on the information that the countries themselves collect and digest and provide to the kind of the main hub that's here in Copenhagen, that has the purpose of making sense of some of that the European scale and create the messages that are underpinned by these sort of information. But the role, the interpretation of the role is probably broader, but the core mission is also what is generally expected from key institutional partners is that one. Okay, so really providing the information. But the agency has been doing much more than that, and also the activities I'm illustrating are along that line, I would say. So the more complementary in terms of creating the space for basically establishing new framings or influencing policy development, again in view of supporting sustainable development and so on. So the character of it is fundamentally about the organization. So we work at the interface between science and policy in a way. We don't do the science ourselves. It's also the interface with society in a sense because of this country dimension, which is very prominent. It's very specific of the context of the agency compared, for instance, to the European Commission. And for this reason is a network organization, again, very much dependent on strong networks to carry out its work. So, and we are located in Copenhagen, this very nice building where we're sitting, not me today anyway. All right, you might know of the agency because of the fact that what is published sometimes becomes very, very relevant and very visible, not just to policymakers interested in the thematic subjects, but also for the general public. In particular, issues like impacts associated with air pollution on health, the ones that really picked up by media the most and really hit a lot of reached a high number of hits on the web. Because of course this is something very relatable in a way. There are other areas, including climate change, that are also quite popular, and other who are perhaps less, but still. And I'm just saying this because, let's say, the level at which we are working also provides, and the visibility that's associated with that provides a context that has to be navigated. Yeah. And the main flagship product, and fundamentally the only product that the EA is mandated to develop by its regulation, is the State of the European Environment State and Outlook product, which is a publication that is made every 5 years, and in the end is fundamentally the collection and the translation of these huge flows of data and information concerning the state, trends, and prospects for the European environment. And this is a very policy relevant document because, and here in this slide, you see kind of the progression since the establishment of the agency in 1995, the progression of these assessments called the European Environment State and Outlook. They have been influential in shaping up some of the key policies that the European Commission has been developing in relation to the environment and beyond, starting from the European Environment Action Programme, which is quite a high-level goal setting type of and vision setting type of policy document, so strategic, I would say, but also has been quite influential. The latest edition of the State of the European Environment, quite influential in shaping some of the foundations, I would say, at least conceptually, of the European Green Deal, especially around the concept of sustainability transition. So this is really where the kind of science policy interface plays out, and what we do, we can see can have quite an impact sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't. It maybe didn't for a long time, not to the scale that we have seen recently, with again the uptake of the development and the uptake of these Green Deal and green reflection. So, which again creates some opportunities and also challenges in relation to the practices that we adopt in developing our work. And I personally have contributed to this, to the latest edition of the assessment, mostly dealing with a part of the assessment that was focusing on systemic challenges, systems of production and consumptions, and what it means for kind of transforming them towards sustainability. Okay, some normative challenges there, but I won't spoil them for now. And again, the context again, is quite again relevant for policies, and that's so these products are not just you know, a compilation of knowledge, but also are developed through interactions with stakeholders. And this is very important because the way the narratives are generated in these macro assessments is iterative, of course, but also happens in a certain context. And it's a context that is not necessarily the one that is opening up for a very extended community of peers, in a sense. But I'll get to that in a moment. And another thing that is important that I want to convey you for setting the context right in this presentation is that the agency has been recently moving and investing and shifting the emphasis of its messaging from a kind of problem-focused, or defined as problem-focused orientation in terms of the knowledge it provides, you know, so the levels of pollution and you know, threats to biodiversity and the sort, towards something which is called in our environment kind of solutions-oriented knowledge, which again it has been very much influential, I would say, in the definition of the conceptualization of the European Green Deal in a way. But and it's an interesting development, but also it carries some potential challenges in relation again to normative aspects, in relation to practices, who has a say in defining what is a solution, what's not. But what is very clear is that this shift, which was quite successful in a way, again for the purpose of what we do, has required a new type of knowledge and created a new set of questions. So opened up for some reflexivity, which I think was a good thing. And the way that's been this concept of sustainability transitions, so solutions for sustainability, has been often interpreted as the need to, let's say, change the current regime of a system, whatever it is. Let's suppose a system of production and consumption like energy or mobility or the food system and so on, which is obviously influenced and dependent on a very interconnected variety of factors of different nature and so on. And generally, these regimes can be stable, at least within a certain time span. And then again, this idea of the solutions, it relates very much to this framework called multi-level perspective, by the way, in which these three levels are distinguished: the regime, the niches, and the landscape. And again, the regime is the current configuration of the unsustainable systems. The niches are something that are pools of innovations and experimentation in certain environments, be it technologies or social practices of the sort, and some changes at the level of the landscape. So above the level of the system regime happens, and this creates an opportunity for a reconfiguration, and therefore the interpretation that the agency gave in its state of the environment, there's an opportunity for fostering the upscaling of niches so that the new regime that emerges after these major perturbations can look like something that's more sustainable than the one that was there before, right? Which is then pointing to the fact that we can probably decide to stop doing certain things because they are identified to be unsustainable, and again scale up other practices. So these niches that are defined to be sustainable are supposedly bringing a higher degree of sustainability at the regime level. And this connects to a number of policies and the messages that you can find in the third and last part of the state of the environment is fundamentally around these lines, that a mix of different policies at different levels is necessary so to make this happen, right? So disrupt the incumbent systems and enable the diffusion and upscale of other practices. I guess these are two frameworks that can be useful in certain ways. They have been influential for sure in bringing the issue of sustainability closer to the core of the policy, but there are also some challenges associated with that. And what I'm going to say now is basically as a reflection, taking from the perspective of postnormal science, how the current practices and the setting and the way of operating that have just been described for the agency can be interpreted, perhaps challenged, and whether we could do something better or differently, and also illustrate a couple of cases in which we tried to do something different and their reflection around challenges and opportunities. So, I mean, we are all here in this special interest group, so perhaps there's no need for this slide, but I'm going to just mention that anyway, so we're on the same page. At least this is a bit my interpretation of PNS, no? As a strategy, and these situations of high uncertainties, complexities, and decision stakes, at least one of the two dimensions. When one of those two is high, then we're in a postnormal science situation. And the key features of this strategy, fundamentally to deal with these problems, are listed here. And this has been kind of guiding the initiation of these projects that I'm going to explain later on. So one of the key features is clearly the importance of appraising the quality of the knowledge which is used to make certain decision, or I would say a certain claim in a certain context, which goes hand in hand with appraisal and communication of the uncertainty which is associated to that, be it of kind of technical nature or more epistemic nature. And therefore, I define this as fitness for purpose. So this is the knowledge that is mobilized here, fit for the purpose it's intended. And then the other two main classical features belong to the legitimacy of the fact, the multiple perspectives that we see in society every day. Now we do disagree on many issues sometimes societally, and that's the richness also. So and the third, and it's important to acknowledge that and to engage in a way that is not assuming that we just have one way, one unique set of values or preferences over certain issues. And the third point is the call for democratization of expertise. If I interpret well the words of the postnormal science community, so the need for, also in connection to the previous point, to basically engage with civil society at large, and the peers are not just the technical experts on a very specific issue, but it's citizens, largest persons who have a stake in a way or another, and who will be basically subject to the effects of the decisions that are made. So because there are different ways of knowing and the sort. So maybe again, no need to spend further time on this, but these 3 points for me were quite influential in the way I've tried to implement PostNormal Science inspired projects. And first of all, I did, and this is just my opinion, not necessarily representing the agency as such, but I think it's fair to reflect on whether what we do at the agency is meeting or close or not to these 3 main features, and because it helps reflexivity and improvement towards the better knowledge paradigm in the end, and better practices possibly. And in relation to the first point, I think that what we do at the agency is characterized by definitely institutional sensibility on the issue of quality and uncertainty appraisal and communication. There are some procedures, but mostly focusing on technical quality assurance, quality checks, and not very much on the kind of higher level of certainty and quality. So the one that pertains to narratives and framing. So there's no explicit process of appraisal in the when, say, knowledge claims are generated. Let's say that the underpinning evidence base, it is thoroughly assessed, but the way the narratives are developed is done in a way that's not necessarily based on an explicit appraisal of them. They're they develop in a context, but it's an implicit process. It's not a step that is kind of formalized, and I think that's potentially a challenge, but also an opportunity. Yeah, and also there's a lack of generalized approaches across the agency towards knowledge quality assessment, which again means that different corners of the agency, depending on the relevant thematics, adopt different methodologies and different even frameworks. So these again could be an opportunity for improvement. And as I was saying before, typically the attention of these quality and uncertainty aspects is focused on the monitoring data and kind of information indicator development stages, whereas the assessment and kind of knowledge generation, where again the narratives and the framings that are developed and which are underpinned by worldviews and values are not necessarily within scope, or not always. At least that was the case when I joined the agency 6 years ago. There was no such explicit reflection. And again, it creates some potential challenges and opportunities. The second point, multiple perspectives. Yeah, it is acknowledged by, I think, by the agency, obviously, that society, within society, we have different worldviews and the sort, but the extent to which this is formally incorporated in the way we do our assessment, well, it's limited, I would say. So there's recognition, there is some mentioning, but we do not necessarily deal with the diverging viewpoints and perspectives in a way that is very, very structured. Again, I think it's part of the art of doing assessments in a way, but it's probably a point that deserves some further methodological guidance, and because again there is a genuine interest, I think, in actively engaging with civil society and beyond. But we currently, because of our institutional structure, we mostly engage with stakeholders, which are to be found within our institutional partners, those the countries, the European Commission, other agencies, our scientific committee. Therefore, I would say we are less exposed to other norms and values than the ones that belong to this epistemic community, in a way, if there's one that can be represented by these actors altogether. So, and also these actually can be interestingly observed by the fact that sometimes when we do integrated assessments, they are referred as objective knowledge products. Which I think is a problematic definition for such let's say, endeavors that deal with challenges which are systemic, very uncertain and complex, so very post-normal in the sense of the PostNormal Science definition there. Therefore, I think there's a bit of a disconnect compared between what the PNS insights suggest along these lines and the current practice. And lastly, which is very much connected to the previous point, and it's probably where we are more distant, I mean, institutionally from the practices that are recommended and through PNS lens, is the fact that the expertise and the knowledge that we use is fundamentally the one that comes from scientific endeavors and technical reports. There are some citizen science initiatives. I think it's a good thing. The agency is quite active on that. But on the other hand, as I was mentioning before, the consultation processes and stakeholders involved don't really reach not extended ones. They do not reach extended peer communities as suggested. So again, there's a limited exposure to other forms of knowing, but this is obviously justified by this, I mean, to some extent by the scale at which we are operating. So how do you engage at the European level with citizens? It's not as straightforward. There are no examples of that, but it's not definitely straightforward. And also with, I guess, the institutional identity and the way these type of knowledge for science institutions were conceived originally. All right. So this was a bit the kind of the looking at the challenges and seeing where we could probably do something different or better. And in the course of the 6 years, I had the opportunity to develop 3 projects that I think were to some extent inspired by PNS thinking. The first one is on quality of evidence and uncertainty in supporting the state of the environment report. The second one was actually the development of an EEA report per se, which focused on, again, systemic challenges and very interconnected and uncertain developments through foresight and other forms of knowledge. And the third one, which is ongoing at the moment, is titled Narratives for Change, which is actually a series of EA briefings. And what I'm going to do now, I will present in detail the first one and the third one. We don't have time to cover them all for sure. And I'll come to, again, generalization of the opportunities and challenges I've seen by developing them in this context. And again, apologize if it's not super, formalized in a way, but it's really a kind of hands-on experience that I'm happy to share with you and receive comments and open a conversation on how you see the issue and the opportunity there. Right, quality of evidence and uncertainty was basically a project supporting the development of the State of the Environment Report 2020. I was justified by a very specific context, I would say. At least that was the lens that was used, or the entry point that was used for raising the issue of uncertainty, of different forms of knowledge, of evidence, but also the fact that we may know much less than what we think we know, and the sort, also because of the social problems that characterize the scientific endeavor and so on. So I've used a lot of the material that was developed by some of the scholars in PostNormal Science in order to make the case for this project to happen. Again, we're following these main 3 lines of justification. So we kind of live in a post-factual politics, and that was what, 2017. So it was pre-COVID, right? Which makes quite a difference, but just to position that. And then there were some quite serious criticism on the role of expertise. We were just over the financial crisis in a way, and also there were recognition of the crisis in science in the way it is developed, right? And what I provided to my audience, my managers, is that some examples coming from the PNS community, that scandals occur all the time, and we need fundamentally as an institution to be prepared for clearly backing up our statements and claims, and that's generally not an issue as such. But as soon as you enter some more slippery knowledge arena like solutions and transitions, where say values, worldviews really matter a lot, then there could end up into some challenges. So this was fundamentally always almost a risk management logic that caught attention in there, but also the fact that other institutions, quite a few, were already working on this, like IPCC and IPBES, but even before that, the PBL, so the Netherlands Environment Assessment Agency, that had a guidance for uncertainty assessment and communication. So I'm trying to maybe speed up a bit here. We had a project which ended up in providing a couple of outcomes. One of them was a checklist for authors, again, based on inspiration from PBL's work, in which we put on the table the fact that you do not only have to have an appraisal of the uncertainties and the quality of the evidence of the numbers that you use, but very much you should be working at appraising the framing and the perspectives that implicitly an author of the assessment adopts. And sometimes it's difficult to see that when an author is very much, let's say, taken up by the environment within which he or she operates, right? So if there's a specific policy, there's clearly a specific framing, and therefore questions further than that are sometimes not even thought of relevance in defining the problem. Whereas when you move towards again a sustainability, transition, transformation, or even solution perspective, that becomes questionable, no? Because there are different views on what would be the right path. And so we have developed this assessment. We developed a short training, this checklist, a short training for the authors, and they have used some of it, I would say. And in the end, the State of the Environment report, for the first time ever, had at least a little box on the robustness of the messages that were conveyed at the level of summary assessment. So every in each thematic chapter, like air quality or climate change and so on, had to have an explicit reflection informed by that checklist. This was a kind of nice development, but the limitation of that is that the framing aspect was the one that was the least taken up by authors, whereas a lot of comments and information about data gaps and, again, technical sources of uncertainty and so on were mostly present there. It was more difficult to have reflections around the framings underpinning certain assessments. But I guess that was just an incremental advantage or incremental change in a context which is typically very it goes through quite some pressure. I mean, the whole development of the SOIR 2020 and in general SOIR requires large coordination of a number of factors, and therefore some questions kind of might become too problematic for the whole process, and then they may be dropped. Another outcome was a research paper that was co-authored by the members of the PostNormal Science community that helped and that contributed to this endeavor. And the paper as such is still being useful these days in the way the agency reflects on its approaches to sustainability assessment, particularly in the program where I'm situated. So I think it was useful for that reason. So it's being mentioned and used in a way. And it overall, this exercise increased awareness also for those who were not necessarily aware of the importance of basically the social sciences in reflecting on the way we frame the environment and so on. There was also some level of legitimation by the senior managers in the institution. But then again, these type of changes required quite some time, I think, to take effect. Also many contextual factors, and again, these very complex processes, pragmatic considerations dominate. So frame is given by policy, and it's hard to create the room for something complementary to that. Sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's less. There are institutional boundaries. Again, what we could do by adopting that checklist approach is clearly not enough to engage with a larger community of peers, right? So it's an institutional lock-in in a way that cannot be solved at that level, but it's still persistent. And also sometimes there was individual resistance, so to say, to implement something that has been felt as being outside the comfort zone of the individual authors, because some colleagues were not used to this type of work, and meant additional workload, again, in a quite tight time frame. So and also new jargon and the sort. So these are aspects to reflect upon. So there was in the end a partial uptake, which I think it was good to create the opportunity for working further towards the next edition of the State and Outlook of the European Environment for 2025. But on the other hand, this creates the risk of watering down the whole purpose of these knowledge quality assessment practices, right? So we wanted to open up debate, but it was really difficult to reach the level expected, at least. So, and this was the first case. And the third case, the one on narratives for change, has a totally different entry point. Let's say it builds on this logic of sustainability transition, transformations, the fact that we have been acknowledging more and more, and also because of COVID, I would say so that we live in an uncertain world, in a sense, and that the challenges that we face are systemic in nature, and there are multiple interconnected factors that have shaped the way say these challenges and the goals and the progress towards the achievement of certain goals occurs, right? So we now understand, I think, also in our context, that say a very reductionist approach doesn't really lead to much when supporting policies from the angle of integrated sustainability assessment, right? So we basically, this project built on this progressive development of understanding of the world and the forms of knowledge and also the higher goals that have been put forward by the Commission, and try to suggest that not only we can discuss about these niche innovations, like in the framework of sustainability transitions, that's an opportunity there, but when doing so, we shouldn't be forgetting that we live in these systems that, again, are complex and uncertain, but they're also very much locked in and entrenched into certain practices and structure, which cannot be solved just by a change in technologies. There's no silver bullets. We rather need to reflect on the values underpinning our behavior, our collectively, I mean, not just as an individual, but the interface between these systems and the individuals, and that the change that has to happen in a way to achieve the expected sustainability goals by the Green Deal and so on should probably touch upon deeper levers than just, again, changing one specific behavior or adopting one specific technology. So long story short, also by building on some say foundational work by Daniela Meadows, we have managed to justify an investment in a certain activity called these narratives for change, which is operating not, again, at the technological efficiency level, which is the one closer to which has the lowest leverage point, let's say, but at the level of the paradigms of the narratives, and possibly creating an overview of different ways of understanding and valuing what we do and what we are, in a sense, which can help in rethinking what are the goals of the systems that we are living within and contributing to. So towards transformative change. So in short, the principles and aims of this series of EA briefings, which are short pieces, like 6 pages long, that are published online and are disseminated through the EA channels, is really to focus on paradigms, social practices, challenge assumptions related to established worldviews, and be inspirational and possibly stimulate agency and change. I mean, it's ambitious, but this was really the motivation behind this line of work, which ended up in a number of currently 3 briefings. The first one of which was had reached quite some attention from within our stakeholders, but also more broadly, and had went, I think, to one of the core challenges that we face, and the title of it was "Growth Without Economic Growth." So we put on the table the fact that maybe we need to reflect on that as a foundational paradigm of our society, and we put on the table different sets of perspectives. And I think this is PostNormal Science inspired precisely because of that, because the multiplicity of legitimate perspective kind of found its way into the debate through these type of products, and this was quite successful in terms of also engaging with the public. It has been picked up by organizations, NGOs, but also commission members, and we had quite a number of dissemination events at the European level, at the national level, and we were not expecting that. We were not expecting that type of success. Anyway, and other 2 briefings that have been, one very recently published, are around innovation and precaution, in a sense, so beyond the technological silver bullet issue. And the other one was about COVID lessons for sustainability. There are links here. I can circulate the slides if you're interested in looking into more detail. Again, reflecting on future prospects and how to, and then on a variety of perspectives that help in making sense of this. So I'm here at the end of the presentation, basically. Right. Very interesting experience, still ongoing, the last one on narratives for change. I think this was really the first time, at least in my short experience at the agencies, that we were able to provide different framings and make them equally important and put them on the table alongside the ones that are established and within which generally the agency has been working in. So this was, I think, quite a successful thing, and also the fact that there was no strong rejection. I mean, there were some strong reactions, but there was no strong rejection of the necessity of having this type of conversation. So I think it was successful in that sense. Yet there's been also some pushbacks compared to the this opening, and when it comes to other knowledge products in the institution, and it's perfectly fine in a way, they do not necessarily respond or take up this breadth of perspectives. They tend to refocus and to rearrange their narrative around what is established, and that's again an institutional lock-in to some extent. It's hard to change, but the understanding of sustainability issues evolves over time. So not to despair, I think we have been seeing that these issues are now a little bit more on the mouth of many more. So that's pleasant to see. But also it's we have to be aware, as I think EA staff members, that these things cannot change overnight, and not even in a 6 years time frame sometimes. But also that sometimes, or very unexpectedly, I think because of COVID had really quite an impact on that. There have been some developments towards the appreciation, a stronger appreciation of uncertainty and complexity, which had created this opportunity for engaging with different worldviews and perspectives in the end. So mixed feelings in relation to that. so there are some boundaries, but sometimes these boundaries disappear, but then they come back again. And I think until the design of the inner institutional structure is the one that has similar to the one that has created it, it will be difficult to go much more beyond what's being done in these experiments, I would say. And that, for instance, issues like extended participation won't be solved as in the short term, because again, it has to do with the identity of the institution and the way it is perceived and used, in a sense, by the other institutions, the expectations around it. Right. I hope this wasn't too messy. I apologize, but it's really some general reflections that I wanted to share with you. And last but not least, one of the signs of change that was nice to see, really, for instance, is the fact that the evolving understand, and this is a project that I haven't followed, I haven't contributed, so I haven't had the chance to influence in a sense, but it was really nice to see that the evolving understanding of systemic challenges was portrayed in this way some years back. No, so an evolution from specific, diffuse, and systemic problems, and a publication that was made at the end of the last year. Actually, there was one more line. Maybe sustainability is not the right term, but definitely there was the recognition that we go beyond systemic. We're probably deeply uncertain. We face ambiguity, complexity, and one of the tools and frameworks that help in dealing with that is PostNormal Science. So at least that is inspiring, seeing that is happening beyond. Some seeds have been planted, possibly. Thanks for your time. Very happy to engage in a conversation with you.
Thank you very much, Lorenzo. Extremely interesting. Thank you very much. Okay, so if you have any questions, then please raise your hand. Okay, then I will begin asking some questions. Well, first of all, I think it is very impressive what you are doing. So I think so. First of all, my compliments for that. But still, there might be room for some experimentation still, and that could be kind of cool to kind of engage with that. For example, in terms of like the extended peer community, we can, I mean, we can experiment with that, and it could be, I mean, do you think there would be like room for trying out some different formats of that? I mean, we can easily, or I don't know easily, but we can at least, we can do some nice proposals on how to enact an extended peer community in terms of some specific project, and we can also have other perspectives than the very technical and scientific ones. So what is kind of what are the possibilities for trying something out, and what might be the routine for that?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, I think it's very, I mean, the idea is fascinating on the one hand. On the other hand, if I think of the routines that are established at the agency, and that's just my perspective, there might be others within the institution, is that we're kind of often responding to a policy demand. And so it becomes a bit difficult to create this space for experimentation of some of the examples that I've provided, but also the one on this idea of extended peer communities, because I mean, unless the case is made very, very strongly, I think, and very clearly, I think, but in principle, it could be, yeah, why not explore it? I mean, methodologically and I think it could be done. But also now that the European Green Deal has become very prominent, has become very central. Also, I think the work of the agency is also looked with I mean, much more interest in a sense than before, and this creates potential challenges in relation to who the institution decides to engage with, and at which scale, and so who is the the messages that the institution provides are representing whom fundamentally. And so far it's quite clear. They develop in a certain context. But if you engage in an extended peer community, how do you deal with that identity issue in a sense? At least that's what I see, Silvio.
Yeah, no, but let me just follow up and then I give it to Silvio, because maybe we can also try to do some experimentation outside the agency. I mean, we can have a student project, or we can do a research project where we are, for example, having an extended peer community to discuss the state and outlook document, or the environmental action plan, or something like that. I mean, some of the products you have already done. Okay, then if you don't do it in full scale, then someone else might actually do it. Quite similar to what we did back in, I think, 2011, where we took some of the work of IPCC and then said, okay, now we try with an extended peer community involving also some of the skeptics. But that was outside, definitely too controversial, but we took it outside. Okay, thanks, Silvio.
Yes, I think that your second proposal is more doable and in a sense more interesting, because it can take advantage of Lorenzo and the agency's specificity in a context where it's not limited by its own remit and structure. So, and in that sense, I think it could be a good idea. Simon is around, he's also working on, we are working together on other issues of extended peer communities. So my take on this is that it will be interesting if it started or motivated perhaps by you, Tom, and Simon, and other people that have more freedom, let's say, in a sense, but we count on agency, perhaps on Angela Pereira, who is now with the new engagement center and perhaps people from IPPES to talk about how they try to establish this choreography of knowledges and so on. So that can be quite, interesting and useful at this moment of time.
Definitely. Simon, do you want to comment also on that proposal, that we should try to do something along those lines?
Yeah, like finding ways to extend peer communities. Yeah, so I think that's, I find that in the moment the most exciting part of PostNormal Science, how to set up this idea of extended peer communities in policy contexts, but also, and Silvio mentioned, I think you mentioned it before, you mentioned it often, it's also how do we deal with the notion of error. I find this really, really interesting. If we produce knowledge in policy contexts, how do we account for that the only thing that is certain is the error? And how do we then make, which kind of policy recommendation emerges out of this context? Yeah, maybe I'll leave it to that.
Thank you.
If I may, to add this question, I think that after today, perhaps the European institutions are more amenable to recognize that we are at the crossroad, and it's not surprising that what's happening, the war in the center of Europe now continues to the shocks of the pandemic. So I think we are at an important point and relates to sustainability, to transformation, and things of that type. So I think it could be interesting at this stage to go out with something that will explore all these alternatives, no, and try to face the big contradictions, climate and all that, and fossil fuels and disinvestment and all that, and suddenly you have a war with in Ukraine, and you say, oh God, now the gas is going up, so we have to do something about the price of oil and all the rest. So I suppose that it is the right moment to face precisely these contradictions in a real situation of conflict, and not in a this is not nice, this is not clean, this is painful, and the options in front of us are really painful.
Okay, so do we have more questions, comments? Please raise your hand. Yes, Nicola?
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you, Lorenzo, for the very interesting presentation. What you do is really great, I think, and amazing. But you said we do, in the agency. When you say we, do you mean who exactly? You and who else? How many people are there working on these topics?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Well, that's a bit project specific, but yeah, on the first one, on quality of evidence and uncertainty, we were two fundamentally, who had mostly directed the development of the project and the training and issues. And then there were other satellite colleagues who were not directly developing the concept, but were engaged in different stages. We had workshops and the sort. But yeah, the lead. But of course, these initiatives are not just in kind of individual or project managers led individual initiatives are supported by line managers. So we sometimes means me and direct colleagues. So sometimes means there's an endorsement by the institution that the simple project exists because there's been some approval of it. So yeah, I guess I have used it in different ways. But also another important point is that both of these projects that I have presented have been, I would say, to some extent co-developed with members of the PostNormal Science community, so who do not belong to the agency, obviously, but are have been helping a lot in the conceptualization, the operationalization. Silvio was in both cases there. So again, I might use we, sometimes referring to this extended community of people who tried to bring these ideas forward in this context. So yeah, I think.
So basically, in the agency, there are a couple of people, and the hierarchy endorsing the initiatives of this couple of people. I see. Okay.
That's basically it. Yeah, but yeah.
If I may.
Yes. Yes.
Well, Nicola, you see, I've been in contact or related to the agency since its creation. I think as part of the creation of the technical agencies, and with the first director, Domingo, I was a good friend of him, and so on. So it's always mixed. I mean, we always had a lot of encouragement by. I was friends with Jackie. We worked together. She was quite aware, and with PostNormal Science, the same Domingo, and people like Joan Martinez-Allier had a great influence at the beginning of the agency. So I think it's always a struggle, like at the JRC and other institutions, and we have to understand that. I mean, there is no point in being going against the windmills, okay? But as we learned, and you've been at the JRC and other people around, Lorenzo in the institution, is that we have to strive to keep the door open. And that's our strategic task. And that can be done. And I found that can be done. And and we should be doing it. And I think Lorenzo, we work with other people because from Lorenzo, and they're great. I mean, once you start working with them, doors are open. I mean,
because I'm very surprised. It's quite rare in the Commission, no, to see reports with reference to the growth movements and so on. So meaning in the JRC, for example, excepting Angela, probably, no, I rarely have seen such a degree of openness. I would say maybe it is also because the agency is somehow independent, an independent body.
Yes, thank you, Katinka.
Thanks for a fantastic presentation and for insights into your important work and some great slides too. I was wondering, I was very intrigued by your narratives of transition, or what was it?
Narratives for change, yeah.
Narratives for change, exactly. And I was thinking this notion of, so you also mentioned that, well, the world is a system of course, limited resources and actually overuse of the resources that we have. And this elephant in the room, which is sort of, so I haven't read these, of course, narratives for change, but this notion of addressing the fact that we need to change norms and expectations of life, and that also because we just have exceeded the global boundaries of resources, and that people all over the world are justly expecting more levels or higher levels of consumption. So I don't know, how do you reflect about this knife's edge balance of sort of probing at this elephant of consumption and of lifestyles and life expectations, and then, you know, going overboard and being too much?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's not an easy task there. I think what we tried to do there in the first narratives of the briefings, narrative of change, a growth without economic growth, was exactly trying to, well, acknowledge that there's a certain assumption underpinning our economy, our systems of production and consumption, and the sort that we could basically keep doing the same, a little bit different, but still achieve whatever we want to achieve in terms of reduction of emissions and the sort. And that's dangerous, I think, in a sense. I mean, it's probably something very obvious for others who are not necessarily in certain bubbles, I would say. But it was important that we could say that, guys, maybe there's a point there. We really need to consider this carefully, because we might simply be falling short. You know, this techno-optimism cannot be necessarily justified. And the way we did it, I think, was very diplomatic, just putting, things into perspective, and the fact that there are other ways of looking at the issue that again builds on degrowth or post-growth of the sorts. And very much going through this idea of values, or of kind of individual values and societal values, which again do not have necessarily to be shared anonymously and the sort, but there are some human foundation there, and probably that's the type of things we should be looking for, rather than a very materialistic lifestyle that's not necessarily enshrined in any foundational documents of the European Union, even. No, so kind of trying to put things into perspective, I think, was the way to do it diplomatically, rather than taking one specific position, but still trying to make clear that certain avenues may just fall short. I think that was the attempt. Hope I responds a bit to your question.
Thank you. Silvio?
Yes, I think that we were rather optimistic when the COVID started, that it will generate some type of reflection about way of lives and but with now, I think with, as I say, a war in the middle of Europe with all the, without going into who is right or who is wrong, that is just the side situation. It is the fact that a regime, I mean, a system of an order of the world is collapsing. And that is part of the motivations that we were arguing for a long time. I mean, there are people who don't want to see it, but and if we yesterday we were, Lorenzo was around, I mean, yesterday, the day before, on meeting on a workshop on a project on the precautionary principle of innovation, where other people from agencies and other European institutions were around. And so the idea was that we have to defend the principle of innovation, because technology and innovation only as technical innovation, because that will save the day and fix the problem. I mean, I think this is what we are up to, and I think this moment where more and more people are realizing that this is not a no-go. And if we want to continue to defend a kind of, I'm very careful, a democratic way of life and sometimes of options for more for the present than for the future, we have to take some painful decisions now. And in that sense, all this is a big experimentation, no? It's like with the vaccine, the COVID vaccine. That's massive experimentation. It's not a result of the scientific method, you know? And it is experimentation done in a situation of emergency. Okay, so it's the same. What will happen from today in relation to the war in the center of Europe, we have to see. I mean, I don't want to see some mistake happening in Poland or in Bulgaria, or to have China decided that it's the right moment to invade Taiwan, okay?
Yeah. Thanks. Okay, I have now myself on the list, and it's a little bit back to this the narratives for change, yeah. But again, so the idea is to kind of to map and explain these different narratives, and I mean, kind of the paradigm, or I mean, so now you have the mainstream way of addressing sustainability, or the way that it was used, for example, to address the COVID pandemic, and then you explain that kind of narrative or paradigm, and then you have all the others that you will then kind of explain and map, and maybe, I don't know, maybe compare. I don't know if you will assess or make any normative claims on that. I think you said no to that, but how will you map these different narratives?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I would say it's not an analytical exercise of mapping different paradigms. It's just trying to lift up what has been often not really part of the main discussion, main conversation. So again, bringing in the example of growth without economic growth was right. There have been quite some developments, donuts economics or degrowth and the sort. Let's put them on the table, I would say. But again, it was not an extremely analytical exercise. So the point is try to engage in a debate also with societal actors, because these briefings are supposed to, each of them to be disseminated and discussed into events that bring together NGOs and other actors, policymakers, and the sort. So to have an open debate about this. So to recognize, first of all, to recognize the elephant in the room, the fact that let's not take for granted certain assumptions, right? And we do that by providing something that's was not typically there, not there at the level of the institutional conversation. So I think the advantage and the added value of that of this initiative is really that one. It happens in this context, and that we can be the vehicle for some of that conversation, which otherwise is difficult to occur. And in other case, and this was very much the case of the growth without economic growth. And also I would say on the innovation and technological innovation and so on, because again, very often the narrative there is that innovation will save us. And I think we all know the story there. But we say, well, let's try not to let's try to acknowledge the elephant in the room there also, and look differently at this issue. So again, providing a different perspective, but not in a very sophisticated manner in a sense. And I think it's more material or food for thought, or I don't think they reach the level of opinion pieces, but the type of structure is probably similar to that. Although we do not take very strong normative stances, we're just trying to, again, try to balance a bit the conversation. And with and for instance, there's a new one will be published, I guess, the end of March, if all goes well. It's about rethinking agriculture. There we are a bit more analytical in identifying different framings, way of framing agriculture, what it is, what is supposed to be achieving through certain framings, and there to compare and see the gaps and opportunities. So yeah, I think it's a good question also to reflect further on how to carry this on. But I think the value of it is really instrumental to the discussion more than to the analytical element of it.
Yeah, I think also it's very important, and it brings forward this. The epistemic uncertainty. I mean, there are these different levels of uncertainty, and definitely it's important to have that when we are discussing uncertainty. So that's very inspirational. So thank you. Look forward to the new publication. Okay, so do I have more? I don't see any more hands.
If I may.
Yes, please.
I don't want to go talking too much, but my feeling is that we should concentrate a bit less on uncertainty and a bit more on multiple perspectives and the ambiguity. Which in a sense is a way of dealing with uncertainty in a different way. Because I think the challenge is precisely on how can you deal with these multiple perspectives, okay? And so an extended peer community and the things that you might start thinking about, some ideas with Simon and other people, is like a microcosm of a very big universe in which you have all these polarized visions that shows us that we are in a fractured reality. I mean, ideas about truth have a very little value in that sense, because they assume that we live in the same reality, which seems now clearly not being the case. So I think that in a small experimental, let's say, setting, we can try to think how we can bridge among all these type of perspectives and realities in a productive way, and then provide that as an illustration of how can we do it? Because at the end of the day, unless we decide that we have to kill those who think differently, we'll have to live with them. And I think that's the big challenge of today.
Okay, I think we should. I think that could be like a fruitful output from the seminar here today. That we can continue talking and developing a format for how to enact this extended peer community, where we map some of the alternative perspectives maybe in relation to one of the European environmental agencies projects or publications. So that would be good. So I think we should progress on that. So yeah. So Lorenzo, do you have any final comments?
No, thanks a lot for the interventions. We had a bit of a crisis, so yeah, but now it's solved, so we are good. And no, I think there's plenty of useful insights and ideas to how to bring these activities further and perhaps establish new ones. And yeah, I look forward to maybe further follow up on these and perhaps find some synergies also on projects that you might be running already, and we could connect and see how to bring it to a broader audience, because this also in my context, I'm in the agency, because I think there are very many colleagues who are interested and willing to explore further, and we should take the opportunity to show that these things are possible and are being done in a context. So thanks for that.
Great. So with these words, I will then thank you all for your participation and interest. And let me just do a little PR for our next meeting in the last Thursday in March, where we have Silvio addressing the COVID situation or experiences with from a post-normal perspective. So we look very much forward to that, and I encourage you all to be here next month, same time. So thank you very much.
Many thanks.